Hello, this is Arthur Malman, your host for this segment of GGG Insights. I want to welcome you all and welcome our guest, Perry Gershon, who is running as the Democratic candidate in the 1st Congressional District. Before we start, though, I just want to clarify that GGG has reached out to both Perry and to his opponent, Lee Zeldin, offering them an opportunity to come and talk with you, and we hope Lee will follow suit. But Perry, could you give us an idea of a little bit about your background, what made you run here, and what's going on?
Well, I'm on one hand the unusual case, and on the other hand the becoming usual case. I'm 56 years old. I've never run for office before, and I never imagined I'd run for office. And I woke up the day after Donald Trump became president and said, I care about my country, we're on the wrong track, and if I care as much as I do, I should take action. And as I thought things through, I had a choice of spending 4 years sitting on the couch and voicing my displeasure and throwing things at the television set, or actually going out and doing something. And I realized that the best thing I could do to have an impact is to run for office and challenge Lee Zeldin for the seat. Zeldin is one of Trump's biggest sycophants in the Congress. He does what Trump tells him to do. So if I'm dissatisfied with Trumpism and want to make a difference in the country, Zeldin was a perfect guy to run against where I could have the impact that I was looking for.
Well, I guess the only thing that he's broken with Donald Trump on is the tax bill, but there his vote was irrelevant because there was more than enough to carry it anyway.
I wouldn't say he broke with Donald Trump. He's supported the tax bill right until the very end. He voted for it in Budget Committee.
Oh, okay.
His vote was necessary in order to get it, the bill into the Senate so that the Senate could pass it with a majority vote. If he had opposed it on day one, it never would have been able to pass.
Oh, so I opposed it before I supported it.
That's exactly where he is.
Okay.
And he likes to take credit for it. He likes to talk about how well the country is doing because of Trump's economic policies, which are the tax plan. And my retort is that Suffolk County is struggling. We need to bring better jobs into the area, better paying jobs. It's not a question of how many people are at work, as much of a question of what kind of work and environment do people have. We've had no wage growth for 25 years, and the result of that is we have communities that are struggling. There are lots of issues, the environment, affordable housing, and they're all real. But the genesis of a lot of it is how do we grow wages? And there are ways to do that, and we can talk about infrastructure as but probably the major way. But just to go back to my backstory, I'm a Yale graduate. I was a
we won't hold that against you.
I was a molecular biochemistry and biophysics major, and I went to medical school for 2.5 years. And realized that I was following in my parents' footsteps and lost my own identity. So I took a leave of absence that turned out to be permanent and opened a sports bar in Manhattan.
Okay. Well, you certainly changed your direction pretty quickly. That was it was not a slight turn to the left. It was a complete U-turn.
I'm very good at radically remaking myself, which is part of why I think I could be a very, very effective congressman. I've spent the last 30 years in business. I was a commercial real estate lender, and I understand how to bring parties together, which is what's missing in government today. We have too much infighting, and America has become tribal, and we need to go away from that. We need to bring ourselves together as one America. The president's supposed to be uniting us, and this one's certainly not doing that. But that we should still be electing people to Congress who will work for that old vision. And I'm fully committed to it.
By the way, you mentioned you were in commercial real estate. There's another guy in commercial real estate, Donald Trump. Did you ever do any lending to the Trump organization? Or?
So I started in commercial real estate in 1993. And among the first things that happened to me is I was given a list of 10 people in the country that no bank would lend money to. And number one at the list, Donald Trump. And through the years, I actually had the pleasure of killing a loan to Trump on a building, Nike Town, a retail store
okay.
on
On
Madison Avenue, or between
57th,
5th and
yeah.
Madison on 57th. And it was a perfectly good deal in every way, shape, and form. It was Nike credit. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump was the owner. And my feeling was life's too short. You don't need to sign yourself up for that kind of a problem. And
Well, I think a
so-
lot of us know a lot of casualties of having dealt with the Trump organization.
Yeah, so everything was fine except he shouldn't be your president. And when I saw him running, I became particularly concerned with denial of scientific fact, persecution of immigrants, and the way he was going at the free press. And those are the things that hold American society together. And to have a president who's demonizing our values scares me that bad things can happen if we don't do something about it. And that was what spurred me to get involved in politics. And then among the first things I did when I decided to run was to meet with Tim Bishop and with Steve Israel, former congressman here and in the neighboring district. 'Cause I didn't know the first thing about running for office. And they both looked at my resume and talked to me for a while and said, go for it. You're the kind of guy who can get it done. So I just set my nose to the grindstone and went at it for, I don't know, 9, 10 months from July of last year to the June primary. And we had a 5-way primary for the Democratic nomination, and I emerged victorious.
Yeah, I think you surprised a lot of people because, in terms of name recognition, you had none before you started. At least out here, obviously in the commercial real estate world that's different. But, so you really sort of were the dark horse of the primary, I thought.
What I realized just from conversations early on was Fred Thiel was a known name, and Dave Colon, who had run in the primary 2 years ago, was a known name. But if neither of them were going to run, there were no well-known people. There were Kate Browning and Vivian Fisher were former legislators, but neither of them had wide appeal through the county. They were very much liked in their regions, but they just didn't have knowledge outside of their regions. So to me, it was an open field. And we set about to raise money and get exposure, put my name out on TV, so people had at least heard the name Perry Gershon. But it was helpful. But their candidates,
I saw more of your signs than anybody else's during the primary. I was very surprised.
All of that, they're candidates who have a lot of money and still lose. But what I did was I had enough money to get my name in the ground so people had heard of it, and then we brought in volunteers. We won the primary because we had more door knockers over an extended period. We had more signs out. We had people, the volunteers, putting the signs out, replacing the signs when people removed them, which is unfortunately a problem, more so in the general election.
Oh, really?
And I can get into that. But we just stayed at it. We had a very, very loyal following.
Sign removal has a long history in the town of East Hampton. Everybody who runs always complains that their signs get picked up. And sometimes people have cell phone cameras and can document who is picking up the signs. And of course, there's always an excuse why that sign was picked up. But no, it's a real problem. It really is.
We're having problems now. We're having people graffitiing signs. We're having people, someone printed a 4-letter word that begins with an F and ends with a K about me and is sticking them, printed F Gershon sign and sticking them on our signs. That stuff shouldn't happen. It's very unfortunate. And there's a problem in America right now with two sides, tribal, who don't like each other, and they're bedeviling one another. So Lee Zeldin writes on Facebook, "It's upsetting that the Gershon campaign is stealing our signs. We shouldn't have this." That was code to his supporters as
go out
and steal the Gershon sign, which is what happened. So it's just not good. And we have another one.
By the way, now that you mention this, it'd be a great business here is to steal Perry Gershon signs and then resell them to the Perry Gershon campaign as a well-used sign. And obviously you can have a Zeldin black market too in signs.
I think the better one would be sign security, where you have a truck that drives around and monitors signs being altered or taken.
Well, what we've had in East Hampton is sometimes town workers who have been very enthusiastic, and so they cleaned up the signs along the road only of one candidate.
Right.
So we've seen a lot of that. But Perry, let's go back to the primary. What do you think that you did in the primary that really helped you? Because my recollection is you were pretty far ahead of the person who was second.
The thing that made a difference in the primary was door knocking, just being
So it's
out
really
on
old-fashioned.
the ground, very old-fashioned. We knocked on doors. There were people talking about how their door was knocked and it hadn't been knocked in many, many years. We made the effort in northern Brookhaven and in Smithtown, which are the big Democratic concentrations of the district. We actually lost the town of East Hampton,
Really?
which was disappointing. And the one solace that I took is we won the Northwest Woods, which is where I live.
But actually, I think my recollection is, I mean, I could be wrong, but my recollection generally is the Democratic establishment of East Hampton was pretty much behind Kate Browning.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, they knew her for many years and so forth. So that doesn't surprise me. But how do you get people to knock on doors? I mean, it sounds like a pretty easy thing to do, but I've been involved enough to know that if you came up to most people and said, "Will you knock on doors for me?" "Oh, sure, I will." And then they go out and knock on one door, if you're lucky, maybe two, 10, and they're exhausted. But here we have, my recollection is the Republican registration is probably about 180,000 in the district, and the Democratic registration is 160,000. Obviously, if you get a lot of the 160 to vote, you're going to win. But how do you get people to actually do that? How do you motivate them? How do you, how does that happen?
You beg. No, seriously.
You beg. I'm sure you do.
Knocking on doors is easier than raising money. And I figure if you can raise money from people, you can get door knockers.
Okay.
We've needed, I'll answer your question in a second, but
Sure.
we've needed to raise $3 million for this campaign, just past primary, so for the general election.
Okay, but when you ended the primary, you had like 78,000 left or something like that?
Not a lot.
No, that and the subway token bought you
Right.
one sign.
So we've needed to raise $3 million for the general election, and it's still going on, but it was a hard ordeal, and we'll get it done one way or another. But that requires the big, heavy lift. The second thing I ask people to do is to go knock on doors. And what we found, particularly in this environment, because Democrats, volunteers are so passionate about their desire to change the country. And the feeling is that the outcome of the last race was wrong, and this is the closest we can get to a redo. So Democrats are motivated, and it means knocking doors, so be it. It may get harder. It's harder to get people to knock on doors when it's very cold or when it's rainy.
Oh, raining is a terrible time to knock on doors.
I'll go back to the primary. Before you're knocking on doors for vote for me, you're knocking on doors saying sign my petition. And you're doing that in March and April. And it's cold, and particularly this April was very cold. There were days that I was going out, my hands were completely white, and my teeth were chattering as I was getting these petitions signed.
No, even getting petitions signed sounds easy, but my wife, who's a registered Democrat, did that for one of the local candidates, and it's harder than it sounds. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of work to fill up a whole page. Was it 25 or 30 people on the page? 20. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort. Unless you go to the supermarket and then people just scribble, and half of them are Democrats and half of them sign 10.
That's not.
No, it's real hard.
We give our volunteers, our workers, lists, and we usually do it with an iPhone app. And they go, we tell them which house to go to, and there's a map because it's on the iPhone, so it's pretty easy to find where you're going. and you go in, you knock on the door, you know who to ask for, and it works rather well. But if your hit rate, so if 1 in 4 door knocks is home, you're doing very well.
That's pretty good, actually.
And you're doing quite well. Some people, it's 1 in 10. And then it depends on where you are. If you're knocking doors on the other side of the district in northern Brookhaven, it's a dense area. So you're walking a block, and if you get 3 people on that block, you're not doing badly. When you're in East Hampton or Southampton, there could be huge chasms between one house and the next.
Well, my wife was doing it in East Hampton, and luckily she had a car to drive from one house to the other. And again, unless you see this close up, you don't realize how much effort it really takes that volunteer to do to fill up that page with signatures. But also, let me ask you this. I mean, obviously, we've all seen the headline about the advantage that Zeldin has based on the last poll, which is, I think, 8% or something like that, and there's a plus and minus 5% error rate. But anyway, how do you concentrate? Are you just trying to get everybody in the district? How do you concentrate? You can't do everything. You can't.
So we break things down. So you asked 2 things, and I want to cover them separately.
Okay, sure.
First, the polling. When I started in June or July of last year, people told me Trump had won by 12 points and Zeldin had won by 17 points, and this was going to be an impossible race to win. And a lot of the national organizations wrote us off, saying Zeldin was at it before it even started. And I mean, part of it's because I knew Trump, I knew his popularity wouldn't hold. And part of it is there were so many aberrations in the last race that I thought the Democrats would have a fighting chance of winning. When we won the primary, we went out and polled, and I was down 8 or 9 points, I forget. And we've been polling since then, and on our numbers, we're down less than 4 points right now, which is very, very winnable. And the Times did a public poll that a lot of people saw. And what was unfortunate about that for me is they did it over the weekend that the Kavanaugh thing was settled. So there was nationally, particularly on the Saturday and Sunday, which were in the middle of the poll, a big blip for the Republican side. And what we found looking at the poll is the Thursday, Friday numbers. I was actually ahead when I went to bed on Friday night because they were showing the progression. Saturday and Sunday, I got destroyed, and those were the 2 bad Kavanaugh days. And on Monday, I started to come back. We did our own poll the following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we were down 4 points again. So I look at our 4-point deficit as probably the real number, and that's something that's doable based on turnout. If you get your voters to turn out, if you push the door knocking enough, that drives the result.
You know, Perry, it was funny because before the show, as we were just sitting here, I mentioned that I'm a registered Republican, my wife's a registered Democrat, and I went to the mailbox one day and I found I found many of your postcards, and I've always assumed they went to her. I never looked at the addressee, but you mentioned that you didn't send her much. You sent more to me, and I didn't realize it.
Yeah, so that's what goes back to your other question, and you need to break down the district in different ways in order to run an effective campaign. I mean, there are different towns. You have East Hampton, you have Southampton on our fork, and then you have Southold, you have Riverhead, and then most of the people are in Brookhaven, and then you have Smithtown and a piece of Islip. The town of Brookhaven's the bulk of the district, and even within Brookhaven, you really have to break that down to the Stony Brook area, which is very Democratic, and then the Mastic-Shirley area, which is very Republican. That's where Zeldin's from. Then you have Patchogue, where we're counting on doing well, and then the rest. So if you break it down geographically, it makes it easier to digest bite sizes of it. We have offices in Southampton, in Riverhead, in Farmingville, and in Setauket. And we find that gives us enough distribution. It was harder in the summer because East Hamptonites don't like to travel to Southampton, particularly in the summer.
You need a visa and a passport and all that kind of stuff.
I'd laugh about it because my view was completely changed as a candidate. Before I was running, I was here in East Hampton, and I hated to even see a movie in Southampton. It seemed far. Now I drive to Setauket all the time, so
okay.
Southampton is really, really close.
Okay.
But the other way you have to break things down is by who you're going to target. So when you advertise on TV, you're targeting your whole area. And we only advertise on cable TV because I don't want to have to pay to reach New Jersey and Westchester. So we're already lowering the universe by just being on cable.
Just out of curiosity, if I go on cable TV, how concise a group of people can I target? I just don't know the answer to that.
You buy a system. So we're buying East Hampton, Southampton, and Riverhead, I think. Plus, we buy a separate system that gets Hauppauge. And I think we're on 3 different systems. So you can target it a little bit more narrowly than New York One. But we are targeting New York One. So people who are summer people or weekend people don't see my commercials when they're not here. They're in the city and they say, why aren't you advertising? And I say, it's only on out here.
Sure.
But that's TV. But then you drill down further and you can do online video, digital they call it. And so if someone's watching YouTube or Hulu, and that's the younger people frequently.
I was just going to say, you're talking to an ancient dinosaur here, so that's the kind of stuff that I hear my kids talking about. But
you go to younger people with that. What we found in our polling, we were not doing much on Hulu and YouTube at first. And when we weren't doing much with those mediums that are under 35, name recognition was awful. The last few weeks of the primary, we started doing a lot on those networks, and the name recognition jumped. So it does matter.
I mean, I remember the lady who ran in New York City, Hispanic lady with no experience. She was advertising on media that I had never heard of, and obviously the incumbent never heard of. And she wiped him out because he never looked to see that she was reaching a whole audience he didn't even.
Is this the Joe Crowley race?
Yeah. I mean, it was very much what you're saying. People like me especially are so, still caught up in the idea you have to go on CBS and NBC, but that's no longer how people get news.
Not the case anymore. And so we're on CNN and News 12 and MSNBC, and we're on a whole lot of entertainment channels, TBS, TNT, Fox Sports. My son's watching the baseball game, and he'll call out, your commercial's on, or Zeldin's commercial's on. But then besides TV and digital, we have print, like the mailers that you're talking about. And those get targeted to an audience as well. In a perfect world, we'd send them to everyone in New York One. But you have to pay for the stamps. You have to pay for the printing of the mail. So it's a lot more cost effective to figure out who you're trying to reach with these mailers.
You had one mailer, Perry, which, again, until you told me it may have been sent to me, I just assumed it was sent to my wife, but it had a tremendous impact, I thought. It was, maybe it was the primary, but it was a mailer about this big, and it had 24 or 36 assault rifles, and under each one, it had the place and the people killed, and it was one of the most evocative pieces I've ever seen. And I really commend you because it was a brilliant piece of campaign literature, because it just knocked my socks off. Really.
I'll cite our firm, Berlin Rose, and give them the credit.
Give them the credit.
Not my idea, but I liked it. But we've used the mail. I would say about 85% of our efforts are going to Democrats who don't typically vote consistently in midterm elections. If we can get everyone who voted last year to vote this time,
you probably win.
We'll win. So the goal for us is to get as many of those people out to vote as possible. And then about 15% of our effort is on persuasion, getting these middle-tier voters who haven't made up their mind yet to vote for us. But then we do other things. We started running a digital ad today with a guy named Steve Castleton. Steve is a veteran and a veterans advocate, and he had the honor of being one of the first 5 people that Lee Zeldin told he was going to run for Congress when he decided to run. So he was very close to Zeldin, and the other people were his parents and along those lines. He's on TV saying that and saying he's now switched to me.
Wow.
Because Lee Zeldin, and for good reasons, Lee Zeldin has left the interests of the people. He's not representing veterans in this community the way he was elected to. He served on the Veterans Affairs Committee for his first 2 years in the House, and then he took himself off the Veterans Committee to go on to the Financial Services Committee, which was done for fundraising, and certainly wasn't done for the veterans in this district. And Castleton's idea is if people understood that, they would realize why we need a change here.
No, that's kind of interesting stuff, because everybody just hears that Mr. X voted for this bill or that bill, but you don't, at least most people, including myself, don't dig deeper to find out how it came up through the committee. Perry, I don't know if you have enough time, but our time right now is running out. I'd like to see if you could stay and join us for a second half hour.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, great.
See if we can do that.
Well, thank you all, and hope you'll hear the second half hour of Perry Gershon. And like I said before, we also have reached out to Lee Zeldin and offered him exactly the same equal time, and I hope he joins us as well.